A warm welcome to all of our ISM members and guests to today's program. Our speakers for today will be Harry and Siri, who are the co-founders of Expent, and we'll be speaking on the biggest mistakes in software procurement, a great topic. So please be sure to ask questions by using our chat or Q&A function. We will also be doing a few polls, so we would like to make sure that you participate in that as well. We will be recording this presentation and we'll be sending the link out later today with your continuing educational credit. Now on to the presentation. Harry was running the machine learning group at Workday for many years. Before Workday, he led multiple data initiatives at Yahoo. Harry also has a master's in computer science, majoring in AI, ML from Georgia Institute of Technology. Siri was the head of security, privacy, and compliance at PlaneGrid. Prior to PlaneGrid, he led security teams and initiatives at Zendesk and Autodesk. He holds a master's in information security from Johns Hopkins University. At this time, I'd like to turn the program over to Harry and Siri.
Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us. I'm Srikanth, co-founder of Expent. My background is in security, compliance, and privacy. Being in security, I have spent many years working with procurement professionals such as yourself, as well as being part of the procurement stakeholders group, where we've set up the procurement process, as well as led multiple initiatives related to security, privacy, and compliance. Today, we'll be talking a lot about some of the mistakes that we've seen people make, as well as things that we've made ourselves in understanding how we can improve software procurement. Being in security, I've been a stakeholder for many years. I've been seen as a blocker persona who people hate because we delay the procurement process. I'm also going to sort of give some insight into what is that we do and why does it take time for us to do what we need to do. I'll pass on to my co-founder, Hari, to introduce himself and take it from there.
Thank you, Srikanth, and thanks for the warm intro, Kathy. I'm Harikrishna, Hari for short. So we started Expent in 2020. Prior to that, I was running the machine learning group at Workday, as Kathy mentioned. As part of that role and as part of my previous roles, I've procured and bought a lot of software tools. And every single time, it was not a neat, simple process. It was always complicated, riddled with inefficiencies. And as Srikanth rightly said, I used to put the blame on the stakeholders, the security professionals, the finance professionals, the legal professionals. Hey, you guys slow things down. Like Srikanth is also my brother, and we started talking, and we realized that this problem is actually pretty common across different industries and also different companies in the material of the industry. So that's what led us to start thinking about, okay, how can we make this better, which is how we started off with Expent. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we learned and how we did that in this talk. So before I jump right in, a couple of action items, tactical stuff. So please make this a discussion. Ask your questions in the Q&A so we can have it much more in an interactive fashion. Would be awesome for all of you to be on the video, but I understand that will be confusing. So please do use the Q&A function. And also we have a few questions which we have set up as polls. So we'll be asking them as we go through the slides to understand more about what you're thinking, and also to help hone in on a couple of areas which are kind of important for the broader group. So we'll talk more about that as well. So as part of software procurement, there are a few important things that needs to happen to make the process much more efficient. Now at this point, what we do at Expent is we have done a lot of research in this space based on our experience, me being a buyer in my role, Srikanth being a stakeholder in his role. We have also seen through this process multiple times over and over again. And same thing with our clients and customers and prospects. We have seen through how they procure software tools for the past few years. And based on that, we have learned that there are some integral parts which needs to happen as part of any procurement process for it to be seamless. And as Srikanth rightly pointed out, we have seen a lot of mistakes done by our clients and also by us in our previous roles. And we wanted to eliminate those mistakes or reduce those bottlenecks. And that's what has resulted in Expent, as you see here. So with that, we'll jump right in terms of what are the different problems that you face. the first thing that we notice is like organizations of certain size, and I'm assuming like all of you guys are from different industries and different company sizes. What we notice is if there are more than 1,000 employees across the board, we have seen that in general, you have 150 plus SaaS applications inside your organization. Would love to get a sense of what this group has. So there's a poll question. It would be great if you can answer it. How many software tools do you currently have in your organization? Wow, okay, so it's pretty evenly distributed across the board. All right, so we are also up to like almost 70% participation. So we'll just let it run for a couple more seconds. Looks like we are still evenly distributed. The biggest answer is right now is unknown. Unknown seems like the winner right now. All right, so as you can see in your screen, these are the results. There's less than 100, and the second biggest one and equal is actually unknown. And honestly, these are actually two bigger problems right now, where one is you don't know what the tools are. We'll definitely talk about that a little bit, but this also gives a sense in terms of how this group is divided. Like some of you guys also have 500 plus tools. Good luck. And that's a lot to manage here. Less than 100 seems very reasonable. So we'll talk about more in terms of what are the different problems that people face as well. So one thing to note here is the biggest problem for any software sales is actually not the selling part, but it's actually the buying part. So as a buyer myself in my previous role, and Srikanth as a stakeholder as well, we have gone through this multiple times. We have bought a lot of software, right? So the process of buying is actually riddled with a lot of process, and we need to make sure that the process is much more efficient. And the tricky part is making sure that our struggles are understood as a buyer. And given most of you guys are in the procurement space, this should be pretty easily resonatable for you as well. So with that, we'll go into the second poll question. Based on your experience procuring these software tools, what are some of the biggest pain points for software procurement that you guys have faced? Looks like, again, this is relatively evenly distributed, though there are a couple of winners sprouting up already. Again, we are up to almost 70% participation. So we'll let it run for a couple more seconds. All right, so looks like lack of visibility into the current vendor performance. That's the biggest pain point for this group. And also there are others which are very close, too many procurement tools that don't integrate. We are not having enough insight into buying decisions, and also the procurement process is manual. I'm also curious that a bunch of you have said it's other. If you have like specific thoughts about that, please do post that in the chat so that we can dig into that a little bit if needed. This is great. So with this, whatever you have mentioned is definitely aspects of pain points that we'll be drilling into a little bit here. And with that, I'll hand it off to Srikanth to talk about the broader pain points and the biggest problems, that mistakes that people make when procuring software. Off to you, Srikanth.
Thank you, Hari. So thanks a lot for taking the poll question. That really helps us understand where this group lies. And so one of the biggest mistakes when procuring software that we've seen people make is picking a software that just doesn't meet the requirements of the organization. Now, as you can see from the data that we've shown here, just in the US alone, there are billions of dollars that go into waste in digital transformation initiatives. And the biggest reason for that is procuring technology or software that doesn't meet the requirements. It comes with, it suddenly adds up, right? Like just procuring technology is one thing, but then after you procure technology, you sort of do work on it in terms of putting people to maintain it, manage it, getting it to do what it needs to do, implement it, and so on. So as you add to the cost, it suddenly adds up, and investing in a bad technology naturally adds up to cost that will add to those billions of dollars. So some of the things that we've seen, what happens when we pick a wrong software is that your go live dates get pushed out. The reason for that happening is the software doesn't work and you're constantly trying to make changes to make it do what it needs to do, but it just doesn't. So you constantly keep pushing it out. And then as you're making those changes, it adds to the cost because nothing comes for free and there is implementation costs. And then because the software doesn't work, nobody wants to use it. So there is bad adoption problem. So people just don't want to use it. So naturally the software is going to fail and it doesn't meet the ROI that is required. So you've not only invested in technology that didn't work, you've not solved the problem for which you procured the technology in the first place. So naturally, all of this leads to a lot of wasted spend. So in order to avoid that, we need to look at what can we do to make sure that we procure technology that just works for your organization. That's some of the things that we're going to be looking at today. The first thing is relying on paid reviews to make these decisions. Now, why is that we don't hire employees merely by looking at their resumes? We always make it a point to actually interview them. Why is that we interview employees or candidates before we hire them, but don't actually put the same rigor when we are trying to procure technology? We are okay to look at reviews and purchase technology, but we are not okay to just look at resume and hire people. Now, that's where the problem is, right? If we want to procure technology, you need to do the proper due diligence because a technology that works for one may not work for another company. And that is what you're getting from reviews. Somebody is saying that it works for them because it worked for their needs, their organization. It is not necessary that it'll actually work for you, just the way a candidate and a resume will work for one role, but will not work in a similar role in a different organization. Now, let's get into another poll question. And what we've seen is about 65%, G2, one of the bigger players in the space, have said that there are 64% of their respondents that plan on buying 5 or more software tools in the coming year. Now, let's understand how many software tools do you estimate your company will purchase this year? Can you all please go through this and let's do this poll? Wow, that's pretty quick response. Thank you, everyone. And we have a very, very clear winner already. Nice work, people. Let's get it done there. Let's get it close to 100% participation rate this time around. Well, clearly, we have an audience of people who are going to be procuring a good number of software technology this year. So that's amazing to see. I mean, we are rightly having this conversation. So hopefully you can take back something and, make sure that you procure the right technology. All right, so we have a very clear winner, and we see that we're going to be at least procuring 10 plus technology. Most people here are going to be procuring at least 10 plus technology, but there are people who are going to be procuring 6 to 10, 3 to 5. All of that is great because each and every technology that you're going to buy is important, and each of that is a spend. It doesn't matter if you're going to be spending millions of dollars in it. It doesn't matter if you're going to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. So.
And for some of us, this doesn't include apps. That's fascinating because with apps, I think it's going to go even up. Thanks for bringing it up. And also renewals will be part of this as well. And thanks for bringing that up as well.
Yep. Now, one of the biggest things that we've seen people make is that they treat vendors as an opposition. We are attuned to think that the sales reps or the people in the vendor organization, their incentive is to sell us the software at any cost. Right? We fail to think that by building a strong partnership with them, we are actually bringing them in as a partner and making them part of our problem. By doing that, great things can happen. We're going to talk about a personal example, which me and Hari have faced at Expent, where 6 months ago, there was a leading fintech company that was looking at Expent, and they were evaluating Expent, comparing it against a bunch of different solutions. And they ran an amazing RFP. And instead of looking at us like, their opposition, they treated us as a partner. They ran a process so well that they communicated their requirements really well with us. They were so proactive in setting up meetings, wanting to communicate what is that they are looking for. And we were incentivized to think that, hey, these guys would be great partners. So what we did was we rejigged our product roadmap to make sure that we made features that actually worked for them. And rightly so, they ended up selecting and awarding Expent the contract. So what we learned from that is, instead of treating your vendors as an opposition, if you can start thinking about building a partnership with them, great things can come out of it, because now that fintech provider was able to get a software that actually worked for them right out of the box, because by treating us as a partner, they incentivize us to give them features that they absolutely wanted. So that's one to think about. Now, let's do another poll here. So on the sales side, companies complete an average of 266 RFPs per year. Now, the poll question that we're going to be looking at is, do you plan on using RFPs, right? And if so, do you plan on using technology to automate those RFPs? Let's try to see what's the participation rate this time around. Early signs say, yes, they're going to be using RFPs, and they plan on using technology to do the RFPs, which is amazing, because it's good to see so many people are thinking in the right direction. We're up about 65%. We let it run for some more seconds here. All right. So we have a very clear winner again, that most of you are going to be using a formal RFP process, and that you will be using technology to automate the RFP process. For people who are thinking that they will not be using RFPs or not using technology to do RFPs, I hope what we're going to be talking about the rest of the conversation here will help you, change the direction which you're thinking, and make you think that maybe you should consider using technology. Maybe first of all, you should use an RFP to run this process, and then you should be using a technology to run the process.
Yeah, I'll be curious to understand why you might not be interested in generally RFP process, but that is a very small percentage. But more so, why not thinking of a tool to do RFPs? I mean, have you used it in the past? And I see some answers. We do RFPs for the largest software buys. Okay, that definitely makes sense. And also performing an RFI previously will also help with that process for sure. Have you? What about tools? Like, do you guys like using tools for RFPs? If not, why not?
So one of them has said that one of our pillars is to be easy to do business with. I totally understand, right? Like, doing an RFP, the other end could think that it is pretty daunting. But I actually want to say this, that based on our example that we just described, I mean, we weren't great fans of RFP earlier in our lives as well. We felt that the process was very tedious. But what we realized was that you actually can make an RFP a strategic process. And the way to do that is, first of all, communicating requirements very clearly to the other side, as well as RFP process can be used as an opportunity, as a mode of communication. Like, it can be great to communicate requirements, but also it's a way for you to tell them what is that you care about. Because in a normal way, it is very hard to know, hey, what is that you care about? Because I could be offering 50 features. Now, you may not be interested in all of those 50 features. You may be interested in a handful of them. So it's important to actually hone in on those and specifically try to see how we can see what's the maximum value we can get. And one of the ways is to communicate that to the vendor. And so running an RFP can actually be seen as a way to do an efficient business with your partners. Anything else there to Hari?
No, I see varied comments. I'm just going through that. Definitely Coupa P2P, that makes sense, Kenneth, and Ariba as well, Patricia and Dustin. So recommendations, I mean, not to be biased here, we can definitely recommend Expent because we are working there. But outside of that, there are a few RFP automation tools which actually do a pretty good job of RFP alone. RFP.io is there, Code RFP is there. I'm pretty sure you might have heard of these things. But there are benefits of automating RFPs, and we'll definitely talk about that as part of like how we can avoid certain mistakes which people do when they're doing RFPs as well. But thanks a lot for voicing your comments there.
That's exactly what we're going to be discussing here, which is the evaluation process. One of the things that people go wrong is choosing an evaluation process that doesn't work. And this is the backbone for picking the right vendor, right? Companies spend weeks and months trying to actually, there are a lot of people who actually have an evaluation process, and RFP is one part of that evaluation process. Now, companies spend a lot of time trying to put together a process where they run an RFP, an evaluation, and all of that, but only to come to the end to realize that they don't have a consensus among their stakeholders on which vendor to pick. The reason why that this happens is because it's a poorly established evaluation process. And a good process needs to outline, first of all, the requirements. What is that I'm looking for when I'm looking for a technology provider? And then how am I going to be able to score them? Like, what is my success criteria? What is that I care about, right? And how am I going to be able to score them? Like, how am I being scored against how well I do, against how well my customer support is, or what is that you care about, right? And then how am I going to be able to weight them, right? Like, what is more important to me than the other things? That would allow us to clearly steer you away from providers that may actually offer features, but they may not be close to what you're looking for. So what ends up happening when you don't run a strong evaluation process is that when you don't have a consensus, you need to restart the entire process. And to restart the entire process means that it's a lot of spend because you've put in resources to run this process. You spent so much time already, you've invested in the process. Now, most companies end up deciding that, hey, I'll just go pick something, and they end up picking the wrong software. And then they end up into the same problem of buying the bad software, right? Or people that do end up restarting the process have already felt like the person that needed the technology now had to wait many months before they could actually get the technology. So it is very, very important to spend that time upfront in this process, trying to put together a clear set of requirements on, hey, here is what we are looking for. And here are the different stakeholders within the organization that are going to be participating in the process, and making sure that they have an opportunity to contribute to, hey, what is that we care about? What are the requirements look like? And then coming up with a clear set of success criteria to say, okay, here is what we are looking for. And then saying that, okay, here is how we are going to score you against these criteria, right? And then how are you going to be weighting? What is more important to you within this process? Making sure that you have a process that's structured out clearly will help you make sure that you get an ROI when you actually do pick a vendor. But this process will also make sure that you actually pick the right vendor, which is the utmost essentiality. A personal anecdote. In my last company, I was looking at a list of products that we had churned in the previous year and a half. And one thing had a commonality. The reason I was looking for this is to see, hey, how can we make our evaluation process better so that we don't end up being in the situation where we need to churn products, because churning products is very expensive. Now we need to go re-implement everything that we had implemented in one solution in another solution. So that's the reason I was looking at it. And when I was looking at that, I noticed that there was one commonality, which was that all the solutions that we churned had bypassed our evaluation process, and they used a credit card to actually make the transaction. Now, that seems like the root cause of the problem, which is if a solution goes through the proper evaluation process, it's properly vetted, it is likely that you would stick with that vendor for a good period of time, resulting in an ROI. Now, the second problem that we see happening is people don't end up running a proof of concept. Now, this is funny because how many of us actually go buy a car without test driving it? Similarly, buying software without doing a proof of concept is exactly like that, because a car could look good on paper, like it could have all the features that you care about, but when you get behind the wheels and you start driving it, what if you don't like it? There's obviously that factor of, hey, I don't like it to it. Similarly, what if the technology vendors these days are very smart? They can do a great demo. They have great marketing around features that you may specifically care about. And you may think that, okay, hey, this is great, I'm gonna go pick it. But then the minute you pick it and you start using it, you may realize that, oh, it's not usable really, and this functionality doesn't work as I anticipated it to work. And that's it. That leads to you purchasing the wrong software. And so what we have seen is about 53% of the organizations remain untested. And the reason for that is because they don't go through a proper proof of concept process. So it is very important for you to actually not just run an RFP, use a great shortlisting process, pick a vendor, but actually work with the vendor, get an account, and try out the product before you actually purchase it. The reason for doing that is there are a lot of issues you'll realize once you start using it, and then that gives you an opportunity to work with the vendor to get the product the way you want it to be. And this is also an opportunity to collect feedback from key stakeholders that are going to be using the product. That way, you are setting up this product to be successful in your organization, ensuring adoption. And adoption is everything in an organization for a particular vendor, because if a vendor is not adopted, it's going to be failed, right? So the best way to make sure that we get good adoption is by making sure that you do a proof of concept and make sure that all the stakeholders are involved in the POC process. This ensures that you procure the software that best meets your needs. Just the way, if you actually do a test drive and purchase the car, you're likely to purchase the car that you actually like and something that you will keep for a period of time. Buying duplicate software. Now, this is a problem that I love because it's something that I've been personally burnt with. So there was this instance where one of my team members in my past job asked me, hey, can I use a project management solution? My answer was, yes, you can. And his question was, hey, can I actually get a license for a solution that's widely adopted within the organization? I didn't have an answer. So I reached out to our IT teams and the procurement teams to understand if we had a standardized project management solution that's used across the company. And the answer I heard baffled me, which is that people end up purchasing their own software for their own teams. Now, immediately I started wondering how many project management solutions could we be using in this organization? Because there are many teams, and if each team is allowed to purchase their own software, that could mean many, many project management solutions in an organization. The security person in me started thinking that how many of these people are we sharing our data with? And then the vendor management person in me started thinking, how are we even managing these suppliers? How are we making sure these things are actually working for us? Now, I want to ask you all a question, and it'll be great if you can engage with me here. I want you all to take a guess on, I was working for a company that was roughly around 500 employees. How many project management solutions do you think we had in our organization? It'll be great if you can put your answers in the chat here.
I wish, Richard, that there was only one. All right, 150.
All right, Wes.
We have some 500. Okay.
Some people really bought on to me saying that there are a lot of teams.
500 employees, 500 chapter. That makes sense.
All right. So yeah, I'll give you the answer, right? It was 7. So we had as many as 7 project management solutions that we were using across the company. Now, 7 is a lot of project management solutions purely because in each of these vendors, we were sharing our company proprietary information. And that is not right. And we are maintaining 7 different suppliers that solve the same problem. You may think that we are just purchasing individual licenses for these, but we refuse to think that maintaining 7 different suppliers actually adds to the cost of the company in terms of managing them, maintaining them, making sure that in the current age of GDPR and privacy laws, it's important that we actually understand what it is, what data are we sharing with them. To be able to collect all of this information and maintain the supplier is super hard. Now, the problem why this happens is not everyone in the organization knows what software is already approved for use within the company. And so when I have a new technology need, I decide to go out and procure something instead of looking at what my organization may already have, right? So the solution is it's easy to pick an existing software and work with an existing supplier than picking a duplicatory software and trying to bring in a new vendor. And then the next problem that we've seen is procurement teams are left out of the process. G2 says 50% of all buyers generally purchase software via credit cards. Now, proliferation of SaaS has made it easy for vendors to make it possible to trial different SaaS solutions. So employees in an organization can go simply trial a lot of software. And when they like it, at the end of the trial period, it's as simple as them putting down a credit card and actually purchasing the solution. Now, the teams outside of that particular team that's purchasing it, is it even aware that that solution has been purchased? The procurement teams aren't aware, the finance team isn't aware, the legal teams aren't aware. It's because most companies have a limit for what is the dollar threshold after which approvals are required. And SaaS solutions, license for these solutions are so cheap that it is very, very hard to know, okay, what are the different things that are being purchased in the organization. So this creates a shadow IT problem, as well as a distributed purchasing habit. Now, this process bypasses the traditional purchasing process, which involves procurement being involved, them being the centerpiece of coordinating with different teams, understanding what are their needs, making sure that the right solutions are considered and the right solution is purchased, and then making sure that it is routed through proper approval chains, like getting approval from legal, finance, security, whatever, right? Now, because of this being a new way of purchasing solutions, procurement is being left out of the process. And proliferation of SaaS is making this easy. And this is one of the bigger problems why there is a lot of solutions that is purchased. At the same time, a lot of them are being churned. This is a personal pain point here. Being in security, I've always realized that I find myself being looped into the purchasing process towards the flag end of the process. And in some cases, I see myself not being involved at all. The problem is the business owners at this point have already decided what solution they want, and they have stopped by procurement or whoever when they're trying to make this purchase purely because that they need to get that approval. And Richard, like he says, so are the procurement professionals. Absolutely, Richard. And that's what I'm going to talk to, right? The reason is because security is seen as a blocker, people need to get their approvals to move forward in the process. Because security comes in so late in the process, and because of technology has already been selected, when we look at it and we realize that, hey, this doesn't meet the basic muster required for this product to be used in the organization, we tell them, no, this product cannot be purchased. So what happens when that happens? People get frustrated at people like me. And when that happens, it's because they need to go restart this entire process again. So what can we do to make this better? What if we involved security, procurement, legal, and finance early on in the process? Wouldn't it give us an opportunity to actually come up with our non-negotiables and vet the suppliers against those non-negotiables? And what if you could actually automate this process of vetting the vendors against these non-negotiables? That would make the entire vendor shortlisting process so much more easier. And it will also guide the right signals for business owners such as Hari to be able to purchase solutions that eventually will be approved by these different stakeholders. So, yeah.
All right. So
now that to Hari now.
Yeah, now that we have talked about all the problems, I don't think it would be fair to just leave you with, hey, yeah, these are the problems. Now go figure it out, how to solve it. I don't think that's the right way here. So we wanted to talk about what are some the key tools that should be part of any software procurement process, so that this entire the problem set becomes much smaller. And even in the initial poll question, you guys had said that a lot of this is because it's manual. It doesn't have to be manual. A lot of these things can be automated, and let software help you buy software. And once we get into that kind of mindset, then it becomes easy. Let's talk about some of the key tools that we should be looking at, or key functionality, I would say, we should be looking at when we are looking at a software purchasing process. The first one is an application catalog. So I understand a lot of you have bought software and planning on buying a lot of apps. Apps and software, you look at it in different buckets. And the other problem is we don't even know what software is there inside the company. And application catalog gives you that visibility in terms of what are the different tools, what are the different apps, what are the different softwares which are inside the company. That will just make it easier for you to avoid buying duplicatory software. So that is an important pain point that we were talking about, where there is a shadow IT, where there's a lot of different tools doing the same things. We can avoid that if we have enough visibility of what are the tools out there. And in many cases, as Srikanth mentioned, we just go and buy a tool or a software based on reviews, based on recommendations from people, right? So, but not a lot of people know exactly what your company's pain point is, or most of these recommendations are not personalized to you or your company or your industry. And that is another thing which is super important. And one thing which we do here at Expent is use machine learning and AI, given that's our background, to build recommendations for you, similar to how you have recommendations in Amazon or Google or anywhere else. We want to bring that to the software purchasing side. On a quick side note, we do have a webinar coming up next month to talk about how leading organizations use artificial intelligence and machine learning to help with the software procurement process. We'll have a link sent out as well. So please attend that webinar to get to know how to use AI to make this process better. The third thing that is important, again, we also asked it in the poll question, is about RFP and RFX. Most of you are planning on anyway using RFP or RFX processes, which is great. Using a tool there will just make the entire process easier. It doesn't have to be costly. It doesn't have to be time consuming, because using RFP the right way, where you're kind of using the seller's intent as well, don't involve the seller from the beginning. Don't look at them as another party, but look at them as a partner. Once we start doing that, the entire RFX becomes so seamless, where they are looped into the process and they are with us all through the buying journey, and it makes it easier for all of us. We don't have to send duplicate questions. Some of these can be automated, and that is what many tools out there definitely help with, and we do as well. And as we're doing RFX with external entities, with the sellers, essentially, we can also do an internal evaluation of a lot of these. And that is super important to start from the beginning, because without doing proper evaluation, it might be too late to bring in stakeholders at some level. I mean, exactly the point that you were talking about, Richard. Procurement professionals are brought in at the last minute, just for in some cases, just to handle the paperwork. That is not right, because procurement professionals have a lot of visibility. And if we set up the evaluation process in the right way, they can join from the beginning, which makes the decision-making much more easier and seamless. And also, we can see it from multiple perspectives, which makes the entire process also much more rigorous. And the other mention in the pain points was, we don't know the current vendor's performance at all. That was a big pain point that we all were talking about. And we help that with there should be a tool to analyze and kind of give you engagement analytics of these vendors, and also look at the metrics of these vendors. And we should do just like we do employee assessments or employee, we do that every quarter. In some cases, every year we do assessments of employees and then appraisal and all that, right? So we should be doing something similar for the vendors as well. We should treat these vendors at the same level as employees so that we pass on continuous feedback, we continuously look at how they are doing. And if it's not working out well, probably look for a different vendor, or at least pass on feedback to see what's going on. So at least having the visibility of what is going on is super important, and doing continuous vendor assessment, is having a tool to do that, to analyze the vendor performance, is also pretty crucial. And finally, you need to have like some sort of visibility in terms of the spend. This kind of goes across the board, because you might have duplicatory software, you might have multiple tools doing the same thing, or multiple tools doing slightly different things when you can accomplish that with one tool. So there are multiple ways in which you might be spending, and you might have more licenses than you need. Like, you need to look at the utilization as well. So that becomes a pretty crucial point. And in some cases, what we have seen even with our current customers is, as Shrikant said, people just go in and use their credit card and buy a lot of different things, and then they realize that they don't need it in a month. So you might be paying for a year contract, whereas you would have used it for a month. So this is where, like, using the correct professionals, like procurement professionals and the right stakeholders, looping them in from the beginning, will make sure that we kind of get the right terms and conditions assigned as well with that. And finally, what we have realized is, like, based on our experience in our previous roles, as well as talking with a lot of our clients, every company has their own unique process or unique quirk in the process, where they would want like some non-negotiables to start with, or it could be in the later process. So there might be certain stakeholders, there might be different approvals. So the process is going to be unique per organization, and also it completely varies across industry. So there should be one tool. I mean, it won't work. Like, it's not a one solution fits all kind of thing. The solution should be customizable based on your problem, based on how it's going for you. And having those custom workflows where you can loop in the right people at the right time based on your organizational needs is very crucial. And as I was telling earlier, having multiple tools to do all of this is also a bigger pain point. And many of you have said that in the poll as well. And that is a super crucial point, because if there are multiple tools to do all of these things, great, you will solve the problem. But the problem is, you introduce a new problem, which is all this data is in like different data silos, and they don't talk to each other, and we don't know what exactly is going on. The end-to-end process should be managed by an entire team who knows specifically how different tools work, etc. So that just brings in a bunch of other problems. So instead, using one tool to solve all of this as much as possible without the bells and whistles would be like pretty useful for the entire procurement process to run seamlessly. And that is one thing which we definitely do at Expent. Based on our experience, we have like run through a lot of procurement process in our lives, and we have realized that, okay, these are the different places where there are bottlenecks in usually these processes, and also from our clients. So we have built tools and automations to kind of reduce those bottlenecks, to save a lot of like time, so that we move this much faster and also eventually save money. So that's kind of what we have done. And with that, I think this should hopefully give you enough of a sense of what are the different things that are needed to make sure that the software procurement process is a little bit more efficient. Would love to open this up for more questions. We have a little bit more time, so we can definitely talk about more questions and anything more that you guys want to discuss. This is our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to us. Happy to have a chat about anything and work with you with your problem, in your problem as well. And as we said, we do have a webinar coming up next month to talk about how to use AI, which is a hot technology right now, or has been for the last few years, to make sure that the procurement process is a little bit more like automated and easier. So, like, let the software help you. All right. So now with that, any questions, thoughts?
Or even personal anecdotes. I mean, if you want to share, I mean, this is a close community of people, like-minded people. So if you face the same problems that we face, we would love to hear, so we could solution them, talk through it, brainstorm.
That's a great question, Richard. So I think Kathy can probably chime in on that.
Sure. What do you recommend for evaluations for smaller software buys?
Go for it, Shrikant.
Oh, yeah. So I would say that, so if the purchase is smaller, right, I think most of these solutions offer a way for you to trial the solutions without you having to involve the vendor, right? So you could just go sign up for an account. 1 or 2 people within your organization can do that after they come up with requirements, even if the purchase is smaller or bigger, because eventually that purchase could be bigger as you start having people work on it, because you're putting people to maintain the technology, right? So it'll be good to always come up with those requirements and then go sign up for an account. Just see if what are the things that is needed for you to meet the minimum set of things that is required for you to be able to purchase this technology. You can make this process shorter by not doing a full-blown RFP, by inviting bids and all of that, but instead you could just do a simple POC, which comprises of you coming up with requirements and getting a test account, making sure that you run through the test cases in this solution to make sure if it meets the requirements, and then purchasing the solution based on that.
Yeah, to add to that, Maliman, that's a good question. So what we have noticed is, even for smaller purchases, there are some non-negotiables, specifically coming from like the right stakeholders, right? I mean, even if it's a smaller purchase, we might be sharing data which we shouldn't be sharing. It might be sensitive, and that might eventually lead to like issues. So it would be good to run through this with the stakeholders, and there are like smaller processes where we'll just run through the non-negotiables instead of doing like the detailed RFP as Shrikant was talking about. At least get that out of the way so that you're not getting into any of the risks which might be associated with data leaving, etc.
And absolutely rightly pointed out by Susan there, which is even a small purchase requires security and privacy review for a POC, because like for you to effectively do a POC, you're still sharing your data. The minute data comes into picture, you need to make sure that your security and the privacy teams know that, hey, something is being used, so that they can get ahead of the problem and prevent a major breach from happening. And very good call out, Susan. Thank you. And there was another question about getting the stakeholders to bring you in early in the process. And Hari, do you want to quickly chime in on how we've solved this?
Yeah, for sure. So one of our clients wanted to do this. I mean, they were an up and coming growing company. They quickly grew from a size of like 200 employees to 2,000 employees within a span of a couple of years. So they didn't have a lot of these processes defined, and they were essentially dealing with a lot of duplicatory software with no process, and like stakeholders didn't have even an idea of what are the different tools inside the company, etc. So they wanted to change that. So the way we went about it is, as we were talking about, custom workflows are super important because this company's problem is slightly different. So what they had defined was they'll bring in the stakeholders from the get-go to talk about these non-negotiables first. And anyone who's initiating a buying process will have to go through these 3 or 4 questions, not a lot. And based on those questions, they will determine whether to go through a detailed RFP or a very small, lightweight RFP or lightweight evaluation if it's just an internal tool. So once you figure that out, the stakeholders are pretty happy because they get the information. The employees or whoever is looking to buy the software are not necessarily like going through a lot of friction because they're not filling in hundreds of like questions, but instead just 4 or 5 questions because this might be a lightweight thing. I'm just buying a like license for one software which is just $20 a month or $200 a month or whatnot. So that's not a lot. So I can just quickly go and swipe my credit card, buy it. But before I do that, I just answer these 4 questions. That way stakeholders are in the loop, and as well as I'm able to move along faster where needed. And the other way in which the stakeholders are brought in early is through the process that we were talking about in terms of application catalog. We help with the renewals as well. And renewals are a super important piece here. And that is one of the things. Having a single tool to do all of this makes it easier, because you connect the sourcing with renewal, because renewal at the end of the day is kind of like sourcing, because you need to figure out whether you need to renew with the same client or same seller or other sellers, right? So once you have to do that, that becomes kind of sourcing, and looping both of these in together just makes it easier for the stakeholders to be on the loop from the beginning.
And Pamela, very, very good question there. How do you entice stakeholders to sit down and write requirements? It always seems to be the hardest part. And we understand this, right? Because we've felt this pain where we've tried to get people to come in and write requirements. So which is why what we do within our platform is that we recommend the requirements for you. So depending on the solutions that you pick that you want to evaluate, we make sure that we've already worked with experts to figure out how should these solutions be evaluated. So in your case, it would be as simple as you coming in and actually reviewing the requirements that Expent has recommended for you, making sure that it actually works for your organization, And all you're doing at that point is customizing them, the requirements that we provided, to meet your specific needs. So we've already taken care of the hardest part, which is writing these requirements from the scratch. It's all about you reviewing those and making it fit your specific needs.
Yeah, one thing to add there, do attend the webinar next month. We are going to talk about how we use AI to kind of figure out what requirements actually will work for you based on who you are, who your peers are, what worked for you in your previous negotiations and stuff. So that way, all of these will be kind of recommended and pre-filled for you, where it's more of a review instead of coming up from scratch. So that would make it easier. The next question from Terry, I mean, it's again a really good question. So we actually ran into this last week. We were with one of our clients, we were in their offices, and we were literally writing down the timeline to see where is the time spent mostly. And as you rightly said, the negotiation process of software license after procurement, it takes a long time. And that is true across the board. And if you look at it, the two major like people with huge time sinks there is the legal group and the security group. Like everyone else can make a decision a little bit faster because the legal group have to go back and forth on some of these, and security group, it's the same thing. They need to make sure that they do the right kind of due diligence because it's super crucial for them to get that done. They take the longest time. So how we potentially help with some of those is from the legal side, if they have already done certain contracts past with other vendors or with the same vendor as well, we use those terms and try to push on that to the newer vendor as well. Given they are all in the similar bucket, some of these things with just makes it move a little bit faster. And that is the requirements which I was talking about a little bit earlier as well. From the security perspective, we provide a lot of insights. And again, if say, for instance, you have been working with Google, adding one more Google product is a little bit easier because you've already gone through their like SOC 2 compliance certifications and other security certifications to make sure that they are okay. So adding one more makes it easier instead of bringing in someone completely new where you have to do all of this from scratch.
The next question from Sharon is very interesting. What are the top things a buyer should look for at annual renewals in the 8 to 6 months prior to renewal date? What are your thoughts on using renewals as an opportunity to have a conversation negotiation? Any thoughts on opportunity around maintenance renewals? Hari, do we want to talk about our renewal page?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, it looks like I'm repeating the same thing again. Do attend the next webinar. We will be talking about renewals quite a bit because as I mentioned, renewal and sourcing are like joined at the hip. In many places, it's not necessarily connected that way, but it is actually true that they are joined at the hip. So the way we go about it is we have, you can set up a cadence, how frequently you need to do the like QBRs, right? So once we figure that out, we have a renewal calendar where we talk about, okay, these are the renewals which are coming up in 6 months or 8 months or whatever. And at that point, we also look at all the different information that we can get about that vendor so that you can go into the negotiations whenever that happens armed with all the information. What kind of information would you need for that? You would need the metrics and analytics. Like, are people actually using this? I mean, do we need to even renew it? That's the first basic thing. And let's assume that people are using it. Are people using it for the fullest extent possible? If there are 100 licenses, are all 100 licenses being used or only 50 are being used? Another negotiation point which you can use. And now we also look at who are the power users who are actually using it, so get valuable feedback from them. And who are the users who should be using it but not using it? You also get really valuable feedback from them because you will know why they are not using it or if they prefer something else. We have the ability to kind of send surveys at different cadences so that you understand what is going through their mind and all of that. At the same time, we also recommend software which are internal to your organization as alternatives, and some software which are external to your organization, which your peers are using, which might work well for your current contracting mode, etc. We also recommend that. At the end of it, we have a renewal page specifically catered to that, to every single renewal that is coming up. That will make it easier to kind of go into these conversations with the right information so that you can handle the negotiations better and make a data-driven decision.
And we have a question from Vishwajit. Are there any tips to ensure to validate software that's already in use by a company to see if it meets, let's say, the security aspect? Does the Expent platform retroactively engage with the company to ensure all stakeholders are aware? The context is to understand that the trade-offs that were made with legacy decisions and use them to procure more efficiently in the future. That's an excellent question. And so, yes, absolutely. Within the Expent platform, we allow for you to do continuous vendor assessments, also known as business reviews. So as a part of that, it focuses exclusively on software that you've already purchased and used within the organization. And the goal for doing that is to see if the software continuously meets the needs of your organization. So think of it like the employee performance management that you do in your company, right? Like after you hire an employee, you do performance review every 6 months, 3 months to see if they continue to meet what they need to do. So similarly with Expent, what we do with our business reviews is that we set up cadence for you to continuously review the software and their posture, say from a security perspective, or even from a functionality perspective, to see if it continuously meets the needs of your organization and your growing needs. So that's how we validate and allow you to see whether the software is still working for you, say 6 months down the line or 1 year down the line. So come renewal, you can actually, along with the other things that Hari mentioned, you can use this data point to see if you should be renewing this vendor or not.
And Richard, to your question in terms of reducing time associated with negotiating the terms and conditions for software, with specifically software companies. So we have tried this in a few ways. It's not a solved problem yet. Even with us, we are trying out multiple options, but a couple of things which we have tried. So we help the legal teams in multiple companies in my previous role. We help the legal teams with specific software, which will kind of summarize the important takeaways from the contract so that they can look at it and say that, oh, this looks great. But as you know, most of the legal folks are not going to be okay with just looking at the summary. They want to pour it through line by line so that it makes it easier for them to understand that they're not taking on any risks, which they shouldn't be. So what we are trying now is you essentially approved a previous terms and conditions for a different vendor or for the same vendor in the past. Now let's see how that is different from the current thing which you're looking for. And showing that difference and like showing just that piece has been a little bit more time saving, for lack of better words, where they're like, okay, now this is something which I have approved and everything is good. And this is something, these are the key areas where it's different from the previous one. So let's just talk about these points instead of going through everything else which we have already discussed and which you're okay with. So that kind of sped up the process a little bit, but it's not still at a stage where they just come in and review and then say, okay, and then move on. It's not as fast as a business decision per se.
And another thing also that has helped is making this process a part of the evaluation process, because when you say, hey, I want these things to be there from a legal perspective, when you do this as a part of the evaluation process, the vendor is incentivized to actually work with you rather than say, hey, I will not negotiate the contract, right? Because you are considering them and you are in the driver's seat. Telling them upfront that this is important to me will actually give you the power of negotiation. And this is another reason why the procurement process should not be shortcut, because a procurement professional is equipped at handling these conversations as against an engineer who is trying to procure software by putting a credit card in. So when you do put your credit card in and make a purchase, you actually are accepting the basic terms of the organization that they have put forth in their terms of conditions. You have no negotiation power. You've already lost the negotiation power. But by making it go through a strategic procurement process, you still can do that.
And the most important thing to note here is it would be good to loop in the stakeholders from the beginning, right? So once the stakeholders are like there in the process from the beginning, it makes it easier to talk about, okay, these are non-negotiables. So you cannot just go and buy something without these non-negotiables. And from the vendor perspective as well, if it doesn't work for them, they can just walk out in the process in the beginning instead of having done all the evaluations, made a decision, okay, this is the one to go, and then going back and trying to change the decision because of something not working in the terms and conditions. So if you loop the right people and put forth, okay, this is what I'm looking for in the beginning of the evaluation, then it just makes it much easier across the board. All right.
Great. Thank you so much. That was great. We're out of time right now, but thank you for all the questions. Thank you, Hari, and thank you, Sarkia, for coming and presenting this topic for us. We do, as we mentioned earlier, they will be coming back next month. I believe the date is April 27th. Be 2 o'clock. We'll send information out on this later today, along with our the recording for today. And you're going to get a copy of the slides as well. So again, thank you all for joining us today. And we hope to see you back for our next program. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.